This is Reservoir Dogs Bloody Days, the upcoming dual-stick shooter from Big Star Games. It's a brand new game based on Quentin Tarantino's landmark film that'll be hitting Xbox One, PC, and Mac later this year. It's a dual-stick shoot-'em-up nobody saw coming, but I assure you that it's a real thing that'll be on sale on May 18th. I've played the first 3 missions, and I know you have a lot of questions, so let's crib this! Wait, didn't they already make a Reservoir Dogs game? They did. Eidos Interactive decided it would be a good idea to create a third-person shooter based on the 1992 movie for the PlayStation 2 and original Xbox. It wasn't good, and critics were quick to smack the game around for having ugly graphics, boring mission designs, and a story that only lasted a few hours. Between the low review scores and lackluster sales, it killed any hopes of seeing any other Quentin Tarantino movies transformed into video games. At least, that's what I thought a few months ago. As crazy as it sounds, Barcelona-based developer Big Star Games has decided to take another stab, this time turning the property into an overhead dual-stick shooter where you play 2 characters at the same time. The idea is to control Mr. Brown, Mr. Blonde, Mr. Pink, and the rest of the colorful cast of criminals to perform a series of armed robberies that all seem to result in an epic shootout with police. The goal is to grab as much money as you can and escape to the safe house with all your body parts intact. Is this a prequel to the movie? You know, it's hard to tell. Based on the first 3 missions, it seems like the game is only loosely based on the events that actually happen in the film. I mean, the movie revolves around a single botched robbery that sends the crew spiraling out of control. But that's not the case in this game, where we're jumping from one job to the next without any of the plot points we saw in the film. The characters already have their fake names, and they seem more than willing to go from one nasty shootout to the next without even considering that there might be a snitch in the crew. I'm curious to see if the game will eventually connect with the story we know and love, but based on what I've played so far, I don't know how that could possibly happen. What I can say is that some of the themes and character quirks find their way into the game in weird ways. For one thing, we're introduced to each character with a fact sheet that references things from the movie. You'll also find that Mr. Pink talks about how he never tips, though it's done in a completely different context without any of the quippy dialogue from the 1992 movie. Also, Red Apple cigarettes show up, though that on-running gag didn't start until Pulp Fiction a couple of years later. Didn't you mention something about playing 2 characters at the same time? Yeah, that's the big gimmick in Bloody Days. At first it looks like you'll have a computer-controlled character by your side for all of these robberies, but that ends up not being the case. In fact, the whole idea is that you'll control one player as the other guy doesn't move at all. Every so often, you'll press a button and literally rewind time to switch characters, this time moving around and trying to keep up with the other guy you controlled. This is a little confusing at first, since it allows you to kill enemies out of order and actually change the outcome of the previous run. You'll need to keep switching and rewinding time in order to get both criminals to the right spot and advance through the stage. It's a unique way of handling things, to say the least, but part of me would rather have seen the other guy controlled by either the computer or an online friend. That said, I'm actually a little curious to see if the developers will flesh out this mechanic as things become more harrowing for the crew. While I have some misgivings about the way the rewind function works, I'm still on board with the idea and choosing to keep an open mind. As a huge fan of the film, I can't wait to see how it all ends up connecting to the story and how they'll work Mr. Orange into the picture. Some of the fan service stuff made me cringe, and the first 3 levels all play out exactly the same way. But I'm still ready to see this game through to the end. We'll be back later this week with a more in-depth review of Reservoir Dogs Bloody Days, where we'll talk about a lot of the finer points and find out if it's actually better than the horrible 2006 game by Eidos. Look, I didn't create the situation, I'm just dealing with it. Hey, thanks for watching our preview. Now, I know what you're wondering. Why preview Reservoir Dogs when you're just gonna turn around and review it a few days from now? Well, the answer is simple. It's because I have a lot to say and I don't think I'll be able to cover everything in the review. You'll have to decide whether or not that's a good enough reason to devote 2 videos to this one game. In other news, we're going to follow this preview up with a review of World to the West and Elliot Quest, as well as a bunch of new releases I can't even talk about yet. I recommend you click the subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.